everybody. We are live on the Dynasty Roundtable on the Player Profiler YouTube channel tonight, Matt Babich. And we had this guest back. It's hard to believe, man, how time flies. But we had him on back in February. And I was like, really? February? Because I was looking through our old show sheets, getting ready for this. And I was like, we should have had Dan on here way sooner than that. Like, I immediately felt bad about it. I was like, oh God, we got to get Dan on here more often. But Dan Williamson is on the show tonight. He's legitimately one of the best fantasy minds in the community. So what are we going to talk with Dan tonight about, Matt? If I can get that sentence out of my mouth.
So back in February, Dan joined us to talk about what we're doing with polarizing dynasty assets. And so we quite literally revived the exact same show sheet, because if the highlights are the players we talked about last time, and I'm pretty sure that they are, we got through maybe half of the names as per usual here on the roundtable. So we're going to revive this show sheet. There's a lot of names that have had some pretty drastic changes in value since February. So we're going to talk about some of them. We have some new additions potentially to talk through. So we have a whole new slew of names. We'll catch up on rookie drafts, how we're doing there, and then we're just going to be dishing out values and fades throughout the Dynasty universe.
All right, let's get the show started. The show starts right now. Welcome, Dan Williamson. How we doing tonight, brother?
Doing great, guys. And if it's any consolation, I would have guessed it was not that long ago either that I was on. So.
It's wild, you know. Like we get so caught up in, like, I guess it would have been around Super Bowl time, and then I got caught up in, rookie prep. Content. The content machine never stops. So I thought, oh, we had Dan on like last month, didn't we? It's time for Dan to come back on the show again, and here you are, 3 or 4 months later. But anyway, we'll have to make a better habit of getting you back on when you can come on, because your insight, like, just, there's certain people in this space that you talk to them and you become a better player or dynasty gamer because you share ideas with this person. And Dan's one of those people. So get your notebooks out, get those pads ready, because we're going to give you some dynasty insights tonight. But before we do that, Dan, I'm assuming you're in a bunch of these rookie drafts. I want to know how these rookie drafts are going and which players you're getting a lot of and which ones, like, maybe you're passing on. So how are your rookie drafts going?
Yeah, so most of my rookie drafts are actually over. Almost all of them kicked off, like, at the latest, the weekend after the NFL draft. And it was real fun for me because I was over in London at the time. So, I'm 6 hours ahead of everybody else. And of course, like in the evening when everybody else is making rookie picks and trades and everything, that's like the middle of the night over there. So it was kind of a pain in the butt to do. I definitely would not schedule a trip like that again. It was a little bit painful, but it went pretty well. And, I was really excited about the players I got. I went with kind of a broad spectrum of guys across my leagues. So I have a lot of, like 2 copies of this guy, 1 copy of that guy, 3 copies of this guy. There aren't so many guys that I have, like a lot of copies of. But, one of them, and I play a lot of tight end premium. Ben Sinnott is a guy, of course, he's all over Twitter and X and whatnot. But he's a guy that I had targeted even before he landed with Washington, and I just really loved the landing spot. So it was all wheels up for him. Another one I got a fair amount of Xavier Worthy. He's a player I'm very, very high on. You can be fast and drafted in the first round. It's not always a mistake, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I felt like he was, even before we knew how fast he was still supposed to be drafted probably at the tail end of the first round, which is exactly where he got drafted. So for me, that says that he wasn't arbitrarily pushed up by speed or anything else. Maybe NFL teams are learning that lesson, but and I was able to pair him up on a couple teams where I had Mahomes too, which was extra nice.
Awesome. Yeah, with Worthy, the Worthy thing really confused me because if you watched him play at Texas, you know that this is a player who he's not a John Ross. It's just because he's fast and undersized, it doesn't mean that he's not a really good football player. Because especially watching those Alabama games, it was startling to me how much attention they paid to Xavier Worthy because they did not want him to get the ball out in space. So if Nick Saban is prepping to stop Xavier Worthy when, you got Bijan on the field, you got Adonai Mitchell there as well. That's a player that I want in Dynasty, especially when you're getting them. At least I was getting them at the back end of the first round. And a lot of these teams that, you made it to the playoffs, maybe you were in the championship game, and you get to add Xavier Worthy, it feels like a gift. So I'm right there with you with Xavier Worthy. We were fighting against these people where like the fast, undersized receivers can't be good. It's like, no, that's kind of that's a bit lazy, I think. So I think Xavier Worthy, especially with the Chiefs, I think that's a dynamite pick. So, yeah, Matt, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I'm thinking about how unfortunate the whole Rashee Rice suspension is because I was kind of expecting there to be a buy window early in Xavier Worthy's rookie season because entering an offense with Rashee Rice, who was a breakout talent for the Chiefs, Kelsey's still there in that offense. They signed Marquise Brown. And then, Worthy slotting into that offense, not necessarily someone who's gonna break fantasy. And so there's always the discussion on, when someone's value falls and keep trade cut, are the owners of that player actually going to sell at that price? But theoretically, there could have been like a really nice buy window for the leagues where you couldn't get Xavier Worthy in rookie drafts, and I think that's probably gone now because of what's going on with Rashee Rice. So it was just unfortunate, but it means you better have left your drafts with Xavier Worthy because it's going to be tough to get him.
That could be a good transition there, Matt Babich, because we're trying to get better at this whole radio business, flowing things nicely. I'm terrible at it. But Dan had Rashee Rice actually on his list of players that we added to our sheet. So, Dan, this is probably the biggest conundrum in all of Dynasty, right? Like, what the hell do we do with Rashee Rice?
Yeah, I think this is kind of like the Tyreek Hill situation, a few years ago when he was being investigated for child abuse, all that. This was all on the heels of the Adrian Peterson thing, so people were really, really freaked out, and there were some deals available for Tyreek Hill if you were willing to jump in there and get him, and part of it is just kind of swimming upstream against the public sentiment, which some people don't like to do. Some people really play fantasy with their hearts on their sleeves, and they don't like rostering bad people and all that kind of stuff. And I totally get that. If that's the way that you like to play fantasy, more power to you. I'm not going to sit here and tell you you're wrong. For me personally, I never look at it like I'm buying a particular player or anything like that. I'm buying his stats, and I'm not my having a player on a team isn't any kind of endorsement of his behavior. Because the thing is, everybody. There are so many people, and you don't know what anybody's capable of, and even the player you think is squeaky clean can all of a sudden turn up with something really terrible in their in their life, and just because you have them on your team, that's, to me, that's not really a reason to get rid of them or whatever. But I understand that there are people who are that way. So if you're the type of person who doesn't mind dealing with players who have baggage like that, this can be a buying opportunity. And I've seen a lot of deals going down for Rashee Rice where it's like a second rounder plus a kind of a throw in type player, like a Wan'Dale Robinson or something like that. And I think those are the kind of deals that if you are looking to add Rice to your team, go ahead and try to make deals like that because you might be able to get one done.
Yeah, that was pretty much like the exact kind of value package I was about to propose because, I kind of try and go on Keep Trade Cut to see where the masses are and, like, obviously playing in Dynasty Leagues, seeing these trades that go down. Player Profilers, Dynasty Trade Finder. You can find who's being sold for what in these leagues. But I'll take that deal all day. If I'm a contending team, I'll take it any day of the week. Because if I'm gonna give up a late second round pick, that's right now. I mean, even in this draft with how much talent's in there, you're taking some significant bets at the 210 to 212. And I would much rather, as a competing team in the next 1 to 2 seasons, make that bet be Rashee Rice rather than an unproven rookie. So if that's what it takes to get Rice, I mean, I'm pretty much buying. We saw how dominant he was last season from a targets per route run perspective, from a route win rate perspective, just always getting open, yards per route run, producing efficiently, and there's room to grow. These receivers especially get better from their freshman to sophomore years typically. So there's room to grow for Rashee Rice, even in the midst of some target competition. So what about you, Seth? Are you buying at that price?
Yeah, I think so. I think, you look at what he was able to do, especially towards the end of the season. Like, he kind of got eased into the offense. I'm looking at his game log now. It was a lot of 30, 15%, 50%. By week 7 and 8, he was at 60% snap share. And then you zoom down to the Buffalo game, and he was on the field 84% of the time, 90% of the time against New England, 74% of the time, 80%, 77%, 60%. So he was definitely ramped up. And that makes sense because he was a rookie and he was performing on an offense with, that had a ton of problems with drops. Like the Chiefs were among the leaders. MVS, came through in the playoffs, but they had a terrible time with drops, Justin Watson and the crew. So now that the Chiefs, if you thought you could beat them, now, if Rashee Rice is probably going to face a suspension of some kind, right? But they add Xavier Worthy, who we talked about, and Marquise Brown to this offense. So they added speed. MVS goes out the door. But Rashee Rice, I would think, is still their number one wide receiver. I get it. Kelsey's there. So if you could buy him now, and Dan's absolutely right. We play fantasy football. Leave it to the NFL franchises to sift through which kind of character guys that that they want on their rosters. And again, some of these guys are not Boy Scouts, right? And what Rashee Rice did was, to pardon my French, he probably deserves the Dumbass of the Year award for what he did. It was very stupid, especially you talk a wide receiver with a very promising career, a Super Bowl champion, and again, you don't ever want to explain it away, but he's 24 years old. I don't think I would do what he did when I was 24 years old, not even close. But we're talking about a young man with a lot of money and a lot of fame, and stupid things happen. So hopefully we'll see what happens. But my guess is he's looking at a suspension, and he'll be back with the team at some point. So if you can buy him, especially for a second-round pick, rookie pick plus, I think that's at the top of the list of my dynasty buys because, like I said, I'll let an NFL franchise figure out the character concerns, of a player. That's not really my job. My job is, as a dynasty gamer, to figure out who's going to score me fantasy points at the end of the day. And Rashee Rice has as good of a chance as all those wide receivers in what I think is going to be a super high octane Chiefs offense in 2024. So, who should we talk about next, Dan? Do you want to nominate somebody?
Real quick.
Yep.
I just, right before we move on from Rashee Rice, I just want to address, first of all, shout out to Jolie Barra. Does a great job editing articles for PlayerProfiler, among other things. But he says, what if Rashee Rice isn't even good? It was just all the other Chiefs were so bad and Mahomes is the GOAT. I'm assuming this is satire because I know Joel's usually smarter than this, but
yeah,
I do just want to take the time to point out that Rashee Rice was third among receivers in yards after catch, despite only being 18th among receivers in receptions. He was 10th in yards per route run. He was 16th in route win rate. There's a lot of metrics that are in his favor outside of Patrick Mahomes. So objectively, I'm here to say that Rashee Rice is, in fact, very good.
Yeah, I think the kind of the question that's buried within there is how scared should we be of Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy, and I do think that's a fair question because of a couple reasons. Number one, we know that Hollywood Brown can be pretty good. Xavier Worthy certainly has potential. Nobody knows really what he's going to be as a pro, but it's possible that could be, and also if Rice misses the first, 6 games of the season or whatever, the offense kind of gels together the way it gels together, and he's not really a part of that. And then all of a sudden they're trying to work him in and so forth. So I understand the concern for this year, from, 2025 on, it concerns me less because Rice is going to be there for another 2 years after this year. So I'm still buying in on Rice for that reason, even though I do think that there is some danger that he might get put on the commissioner's exempt list because, this was a pretty spectacular form of stupid that he committed. And, that it just isn't going to play well if he's out there playing games and, seemingly nothing is happening or is going to happen. The NFL can always say, well, we're going to let the legal system, sort it out. But a lot of times they don't really like players playing while, things are still looking ugly for him. So, I think there's some chance he could end up on the commissioner's exempt list or something like that. So, when I'm buying him in Dynasty, I'm kind of going at it with the idea of, I'm hoping that he's going to be there for my playoffs, but I can't really count on him much before that.
Yeah, but even with that risk, if you're a contending team, right, like a Jalen Polk, a late second round pick isn't helping your team anymore, really, unless you get some really good value on like even a Jalen Wright's a massive bet for a contending team for someone who needs to contribute on, if you need them to contribute on your roster right away. So like Jalen Polk versus Rashee Rice year one, they still have kind of similar value. And I think if I'm going to bet against anything, it's the NFL doling out massive punishments. Like Kamara, curb stomped a guy with a bunch of dudes, played the entire season while the legal matters played out, and then got suspended 3 games. So I'm certainly no expert. My non-expert prediction is 6 to 8 games. He takes it. He comes back for the back half of the season.
Yeah, I mean, Alex P. Keaton in the comments is kind of listing all the reasons why Rice might not be placed on the commissioner's exempt list, and I get that, but then players like Adrian Peterson were, and I think it just kind of depends on how the league perceives this particular situation. I think the Kamara thing, they were kind of looking at it this was an altercation between guys. For whatever reason that seems to count less, but we also had Kareem Hunt, who the Chiefs just traded away after he was caught on camera, beating his girlfriend. So, I never count on the league to do anything in a real rational way. I just assume that lots of weird things can happen, and so I need to be prepared for any of them.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it for sure. The shout out to the chat. The chat is definitely chiming in on this, and so we have Slashy in here, definitely saying we need to go buy Rashee Rice, especially if we have a strong competing team, because I think the scenario Matt laid out is very realistic too. You might not have him for the beginning of the season, but once the playoffs roll around, those fantasy playoffs, he could be like hitting his form, in that offense. So. Dan, is there a player that you want to nominate on your list first to talk about first? I have a couple like that we'll definitely get to, but is there a player that you want to transition to now?
Yeah, let's hit a couple Broncos here. I want to talk a little Bo Nix, and then we can also talk Javonte Williams as long as we're on the same team. Good. But
good. That was one I thought was interesting. It's a very hotly debated topic these days, so I'm glad you picked those two.
Yeah, without a doubt. So Nix, I'm actually in on. I think he's in pretty much exactly the right situation with exactly the right coach. And I think for quarterbacks, environment matters a lot. And I think he's probably in the place that he needs to be. And I think, he gets poo-pooed a lot because, the Oregon passing game was kind of gimmicky and all that. But he was also really good throwing the ball downfield. And he's really good taking care of the ball. And he's really good avoiding sacks. And those are things that are really important to Sean Payton. So I think he's getting overlooked a little bit. I don't think he's going to be the type of quarterback where we're drafting him in the first round a year from now or 2 years from now or even 3 years from now in startups. But I do think that he's going to be one of those quarterbacks that's very, productive for you. Kind of a Matt Stafford type or something like that, where he's got a lot of utility, even if he doesn't have, the super, sexy cachet and everything to go with it. What do you guys think about that?
Go ahead, Matt.
The great radio.
Right.
We're both of us are staring at each
Dead
other. Don't worry, Audacity will truncate that out. I tend to agree with you, and it's mostly because he's a part of the most value insulated position in fantasy football. So, I mean, we look at like the mass evaluation of quarterbacks. Bo Nix is at QB 21. Penix, who most don't even really expect him to start this season, barring injury, is QB 24. Will Levis is QB 23. And Kenny Pickett held value going into his second year. Malik Willis held a little bit of value going into his second year. Mac Jones, we see these, even the bustiest of busty quarterbacks, hold value from year one into year two. So if you're taking Bo Nix at QB 21, it's a pretty insulated asset as long as he is going to be the starter next year. And I think most Dynasty gamers are going to agree that he will likely be the starter for at least 2 seasons. And while his production at Auburn was nothing to be in awe at, I mean, he went to a more talented offense, a more, the offense that Justin Herbert graduated from in Oregon, a similar offense. It's not the exact same offense, but we got to see his arm. We got to see him surrounded with talent. And these efficiency numbers and production numbers that he put up in his seasons with Oregon are legit. I mean, you see that step up, 2,300 passing yards, up to 3,600, up to 4,500 the next years. I mean, hitting 400 pass attempts and then 470 pass attempts the next season while increasing his yards per attempt and his completion percentage and his passing touchdowns. I mean, something's going on with Auburn. Because he leaves Auburn and all of a sudden, Bo Nix is good. And we know it wasn't the surrounding talent in total because Troy Franklin was a 4th-round pick amongst all of these receivers. So what does that say about Bo Nix being a top 12 pick and his number 1 wide receiver, Troy Franklin, is a 4th-round pick? It says the league is actually interested in Bo Nix and what he can do in a pro-style offense. So I do like Bo Nix. Seth and I with Casey Myers, the FF Dynasty, pretty much agreed that Bo and Michael Penix Jr. are both first-round picks. And anytime I got the opportunity in a Superflex league to get one of those two as they fell to the back of the first, early to mid-second rounds, I hit the button all day, every day. I mean, I couldn't believe in some of these leagues like Bo Nix, who's a starting quarterback, was going after Michael Penix. I thought that was kind of crazy. I know the Broncos receiving core isn't all that great, but Cortland Sutton's still a Bronco as far as I know. I believe in Troy Franklin, especially just because he was Bo Nix's receiver in Oregon. I think there's something to uncover with Marvin Mims. So it's not a completely untalented core. I believe in Greg Dulcich as well. So I can't believe it. I never would have thought I would be a Bo Nix guy at this point in the season, but here I am. Seth, what say you?
Yeah, I think I like Bo Nix, but I like him for I don't know if I like the prospect Bo Nix, but I love the situation that he's in. I agree with Dan there, and I love his value. Like I was in a rookie draft just that started this week, and I had the 201 and the 202, and both Bo Nix and Michael Penix were there. And I sat there and I thought about it for a minute. I'm like, do I take Bo Nix and go with, Trey Benson, or and then I just kind of slapped myself as like, I'm a rebuilding team. I'll just take both of them and bank the value, right? Because they're both like, Bo Nix is going to be a starter, and then Michael Penix is going to be a starter down the road. And when we were talking to Casey about it, we came to the conclusion that, if you're a contending team, like, some people like to trade these 111s and 112s back end of the first round rookie picks for rookie picks next year. That's a move that some people do. And we decided, we I don't know if you want to call it galaxy braining it or what, but we said, why would you do that when you can just draft Michael Penix? Like, that's what Michael Penix is. He's a 2025 first or a 2026 first, or however you want to look at that. And Bo Nix is likely gonna start games at quarterback this year, and I probably can take Bo Nix and potentially flip him if I need to later on, even if I have quarterbacks in a super flex league. So it's one of those assets, like a starting quarterback in a super flex league. It's one of those assets that people are going to be on the lookout for. So I like it from that perspective, and I like it from the upside of, oh, well, maybe I'm wrong about this, and maybe Bo Nix is really good, because Lord knows I've been wrong before. So I'll take some shots on Bo Nix, like, especially when I've seen him fall out of the first round, which I think is crazy. Like, again, I'm pressing the button on Michael Penix and Bo Nix in these super flex drafts when they fall out of the first round. So I like Bo Nix, not necessarily because I like the talent, but because I love the value and where he's going in drafts.
A lot of reasons to like Nix, for sure. And, if you want to call this galaxy braining, I guess you can, because I had one team where I did a productive struggle last year. It was the inaugural year of the draft, or of the league last year. So I did the productive struggle, ended up with a 101, and definitely needed a quarterback. Of course, Caleb Williams, obvious choice, right? But I really wanted to get a Marvin Harrison share on this team. So I traded from the 101 to the 102, moved a second round pick way up from the back end of the second round to the front end of the second round, and then was able to trade that plus a little bit more back into the first round, and picked up Nix as well. So I was able to get my quarterback, and I got Marvin Harrison Jr. I do think that Caleb Williams is, a much better prospect than Bo Nix, but I liked the idea of Marvin Harrison Jr. plus Nix better than, getting Caleb plus whatever I could get with that, early second round pick that I had before. So, sometimes you just have to take a look at things like that, and that's a good way to, kind of rationalize the value at the back end of the first round, which you guys were talking about.
Yeah, no, I totally, I'm right there with you. I think, let's do that. I'm reading aloud notes, but let's pivot to Slash. He has a good question in the chat. Can you guys discuss the Broncos logjam of wide receivers? I don't know how to sort between Sutton, Mims, and Franklin. I think this is a perfect question to ask Dan. So Dan, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so I mean, as long as Sutton is there, he's the clear number one receiver to me. Mims is, I think, the guy that has I have the most questions about, just because last year, Sean Payton kept talking up Mims and talking up Mims and talking up Mims, and this is a guy that he traded up to get. This was their first pick of the draft in 2023, right? And they traded up to get him, so I was all in on Mims. I had Mims shares coming up my ears and redraft, best ball, Dynasty, everything. And, the way that Peyton is sitting there talking him up all season long and not using him was super frustrating. And that, to me, is a little bit of a red flag. I mean, if you're going to keep talking about this guy, but, when it comes down to it in the game and you're not actually getting him the ball, what is that saying about the player? So I'm probably the most worried about him. I love the fact that Nix and Franklin have that bond already. They know how to work well together. And Franklin was a player that I really thought would probably be a second rounder rather than a fourth rounder. So the fact that he dropped was, that's giving me some information right there that tells me I was probably a little bit too high on him. But on the other hand, the NFL doesn't get everything right all the time. So I feel comfortable that Franklin will at least be a semi-productive player. I don't know that he'll ever turn out to be a league winner or anything like that. Mims probably is the more talented of the two players, but I think it's probably going to be one or the other of them really has, comes away at the end of this year with some value, and the other one is really scratching for value.
What say you, Matt?
Yeah, I tend to agree there. I really want to like Troy Franklin this year, and there's a couple issues there. Like the shower narrative is very real, and they do have a connection. But at the end of the day, if Troy Franklin isn't cut out to be a starting receiver in the NFL, he's probably not going to play. I mean, Sean Payton brought over, one of his favorite players at New Orleans in Traquan Smith and never actually got him onto the field. So at the end of the day, Sean Payton's going to play who has the best chances to get them to win, unless his name is Jerry Jeudy and you're trying desperately to trade him for whatever you can. So you're feeding him 7 targets a game to try and get him some production, to get some trade value out of him, which is it's why I want to feel like Mims didn't play last year. But we'll find out if that's true or not as the season goes along. If he can't find his way onto the field now with Jeudy gone and off the team, it's gonna be trouble. But he does project to be the starting slot receiver. And the trouble for Troy Franklin is that Josh Reynolds is technically right now projected to be the team's second starting outside receiver, and he's not elite, but he's talented. He's an NFL receiver. Like he's a pros kind of guy where, he drops that pass. I think it was against San Francisco that he dropped a big pass, but like that was shocking, right? Like Josh Reynolds doesn't normally do that. He's very reliable. He's a role guy, but he's very good at what he does. So it's going to be tough for Troy Franklin to get out on the field, and I would throw some best ball bets maybe on Josh Reynolds at the end of rounds. He'll be probably a guy you want to pick up if you have deep benches on your dynasty roster, because lo and behold, rookie hype season fades, and Josh Reynolds is somehow getting 4 to 5 targets a game in Denver's system. Yeah,
I want to say Marvin Mims is a buy for me. Like just kind of looking at the Keep Trade Cuts rankings, I think he was at player 183, wide receiver 69. As my computer freezes up here, hopefully I don't lose you guys. But I want to say he's a buy out of all these wide receivers, and again, like all of it's to the point too where you can almost pick your favorite one if you think Sutton's going to get a majority of the targets. He's a veteran. Like I don't know how. Hopefully, if you're a win now team, hopefully you're not necessarily depending on him to, start games, but that's probably more of a depth piece, ideally. But Mims, I think for me, is the one that I'm willing to take a shot on, especially at his value, because you're talking about like early 3rd round pick for Mims. Like we're talking probably Roman Wilson, Malachi Corley. Those are receivers that were drafted after Marvin Mims. I know it's a different draft year, but I think that's fair. I think that at that price, I would take a shot. Maybe I can get him for a mid-3rd rounder. That's probably what I would prefer. But especially during some of these rookie drafts, and who knows, maybe your rookie drafts are mostly over. I know some of mine are still going. That could be a move that you can make during the draft that not too many people look twice at, but that's a shot I think I would take on Marvin Mims. But we need to talk about Javonte Williams, and we'll talk about Javonte Williams, but we have to take a quick break. We'll take an informative segment, or we will pause for an informative segment from the Podfather about Underdog. But don't go anywhere, because we have much, much more with Dan Williamson right after this.
This episode is made possible by Underdog Fantasy, and Underdog Fantasy is the leader in best ball. When you go to join an Underdog Fantasy best ball draft, it fills very quickly, especially now. It's Best Ball Mania season, baby! Best Ball Mania 5! I can't believe they're at Best Ball Mania 5 already. $15 million in prizes. They're giving out $15 million with $1.5 million to first. Playing in best ball leagues makes you better. It helps train you on player value and strategy. And Underdog offers a lot more than just best ball contests. They offer pick'ems. My new favorite, the golf pick'ems, but they have the NBA pick'ems, baseball pick'ems going on throughout the offseason. Hit the pick'ems, back to best ball, hit the pick'ems. So use promo code Underworld. Promo code Underworld gets you a 50% deposit bonus up to $250. So they've increased the maximum deposit bonus. It was $100. Now it's up to $125. When you get the Underdog app, use promo code Underworld and go draft your ass off.
That got me
Gets me
again.
every
I did
time.
not expect the go draft your ass off. I should have known. I played that same ad read last episode, but he got me again. The Podfather, that son of a buck. But Underworld, promo code Underworld. Go sign up for Underdog right now. It's a great deal, and that promo code will help you out. So Javonte Williams, Dan. Javonte Williams, am I crazy that I think he's clearly the lead running back in Denver, or what do you think? What do you think about Javonte Williams?
I think despite all the, the talk and everything else that's going on X and, Sean Payton saying what he says and all that, he probably is the lead running back on Denver, but I don't really know exactly what that means.
Exactly. There we go.
Yeah.
I've been
thought
trying
right
to
out of my
figure out
head.
what that means for many, many years. And, Sean Payton he usually uses at least two running backs. A lot of times he likes to use three. So to me, it really depends on, I worry less about who's the lead running back on a Sean Payton team, and I try to figure out who's going to have, those roles where, it's really valuable carries, or really valuable touches, who's got the goal line, who's getting the pass attempts and so forth like that. So, the targets and goal line running is probably the most important thing. And if Williams can retain the goal line role, that's probably, what we need to see at the bare minimum. I think that probably there's going to be one, maybe two backs that are more pass catchers than what Javonte Williams is. So we'll just have to see. But it's a really interesting situation there because Audric Estime, was a really good college player, on Notre Dame, which is a really good team. And, we've seen a guy who was kind of similar but smaller, Kyron Williams, and Estime is like a jacked up Kyron Williams a little bit. And then Jaleel McLaughlin, also looked real good. And, Sean Payton has been effusive in his praise for him, so it definitely worries me. If you have Javonte Williams, I don't really think right now is the time to sell. Right now is probably the time to just kind of hold and wait and see how things shake out, because you're probably not going to get a really good price right now. I think even if things don't shake out well for him, it's, you can get in 3 or 4 months what you could get right now. But if things start going well for him, the price is going to get better. And, my recommendation is if you're in a Denver back and, whether it's McLaughlin or Estime or, Williams, whoever, and you can sell them for a good price, it's probably the right thing to do because it's just going to be a frustrating situation. So, getting yourself out of it and being able to get into something else at a price that you like, that's the way to go to me.
Seth, what do you think?
I mean, call me crazy. Maybe I'm just stuck on my prospect evaluation of Javonte Williams, but he was one of my favorite running backs in that class, and he got the draft capital. We thought he was, in a good situation at the time. Then they bring over Russell Wilson, and you're like, oh my God, this guy's going to be great, and we all know what happened there. But I think I agree. I think you're probably holding on to Javonte Williams. You're probably not selling him. And I'm honestly looking to buy if somebody's really looking to get out of him and is willing to get rid of him, right? But I'm also cheating because I cheat in Dynasty. I'm also taking shots on Audric Estime. I'm also checking the price of Jaleel McLaughlin. I'm taking shots, on these running backs. I'm using the back end of my roster to see if I can hit on one of these running backs, so I can potentially. Hopefully, I'm not depending on them as a starter, but hopefully, like I said, as a depth piece that I can use on a bye week or something. That's how I'm playing it. Like I'm cheating, but I like Javonte Williams to lead this backfield in carries. That's probably what's going to happen, especially considering like you have a rookie quarterback. You're probably going to want to throw out, the veteran running back that's going to be standing in the backfield right next to him in pass protection situations on third down. So, what say you, Mr. Babich?
So before I kind of get going, let me start by trying to get a temperature check here and what you guys would sell for. So rookie draft hasn't happened yet. I'm sitting at the 204, and I send you the 204 for Javonte Williams. Is that a price you're willing to sell at?
I'll take it.
I probably would sell. I probably would. Yeah.
And then 2025 second, projected early, but you don't necessarily know. You're still willing to sell?
I'd probably keep him for that, honestly.
Yeah, I'd probably try to rope you into throwing in something along with it, like a third or, some other back that, has, at least a prayer. If you could get like a second plus Kamani Vidal or, maybe Tracy up in, for the Giants, somebody like that, and that future second, that might be something I would do.
Then last one, you have Javonte Williams and Joe Mixon owner comes in and just offers you 1-for-1 straight up.
Oh, give me Joe Mixon. I'm not really even thinking about it too much, but because I think Joe Mixon in that Texans offense, that's hint, hint, nudge, nudge. That's one of my redraft running back targets because I think that's just a teed up situation for him. I think he's still got something left there too. So
the reason I ask this is because on Keep Trade Cut, Joe Mixon is 18, Javonte Williams is RB 19, and just a little bit higher is a 2024 early second. So we're willing to sell Javonte Williams for the 204, and we much prefer an RB that's right next to him in the value. And so just for that reason, I think I'm selling Javonte Williams, or at least trying to, because it's just interesting that he's ranked inside the top 20 RBs. Like, he's not in the best offensive situation. He's coming off of an RB 31 performance in fantasy points per game. His highest finish in his career was his rookie season at 22, RB 22. But that being said, despite his poor performance last year, he had a lot of great peripheral metrics. He was 15th in total weighted opportunities. He was top 10 in red zone touches. The most important metric to me is 11th in target share with 13%. Anything over 10% is generally a very significant metric for RB production. He was also 9th in breakaway run rate, but he was 60th in true yards per carry. So they couldn't move the ball on the ground. And what's telling to me year over year is that this team didn't invest anything in their offensive line this offseason. Their offensive line was not good last year. So they didn't have any draft capital. They didn't spend any money free agency. They didn't make a splash in the offensive line department. So I don't expect that to go away. So I kind of look at Javonte Williams as someone that's like, you have to either somehow earn a lion's share of the opportunity, well over 60%, or I have to bet on your efficiency increasing. And given some of his metrics, I just don't know if that's a bet I'm willing to make. So I was expecting to see his value be more of a later second, and at that price I would buy. But with it is right now, if you can get his market value, I'm going to sell.
I think that's fair. That's very well said, Matt Babich. You might have swung me on Javonte Williams, but like I said, I still recommend cheating when you can and taking shots on multiple of these Denver running backs. Matt, is there a player on the sheet that you want to talk about, or we could go off script? We could go wild card here. Is there a player that you want to nominate?
I will nominate somebody from the show sheet. Before I do, I think we're all in agreement. We can talk about Joe Mixon if we're not, but I just want to get a note out there since just to segue off of that. If you're a competing team, I'm willing to pay a premium on Joe Mixon. Like, I don't think you can actually get him for an early 2024 second. I don't necessarily think that's going to be possible in especially in a lot of higher stake leagues. I'm going to pay a first for Joe Mixon, a late first, a 2025 first. I'm willing to put that on the line because I'm going to say it right here, right now, for the first time. Joe Mixon, RB1 in fantasy points per game again, because he does it every year. He's going to do it again. So, but if no one has any objections to buying Joe Mixon, we talked about Daniel Jones last time, and Seth and I, we talked about it backstage for a little bit. We may be passing ships because in February, Seth was buying Daniel Jones, and I was trying to get out from underneath him. Granted, you guys did kind of turn me a little bit in the conversation by just, he's QB 32. Why not just buy him? But now I'm leaning towards buying, and you're leaning towards selling. So if you don't have any objections to Joe Mixon, Seth, I would like to hear your case on selling Daniel Jones if that's truly what you believe.
Yeah, I think it just depends. Like we were talking about, and I know what Keep Trade Cut's going to say. Keep Trade Cut's probably going to be super down on Daniel Jones because the public doesn't like boring old Daniel. Yeah, quarterback 29.
29.
Even though his value, how is this possible? His value hasn't gone up at all. I mean, come on, like he's a starting quarterback in the league. But I suspect I think this is how you should play the Daniel Jones situation. If you are trying to get out of Daniel Jones, I would wait until the games actually start to happen and these injuries start to take place. Yep. And you see these contending teams start to scramble in these super flex leagues. And the truth is, people are going to see the light on Daniel Jones. He has a bunch of rushing upside from the quarterback position. He's a low-key. This is why we liked him going into last season. This is why people had steamed him up so far in like startups, is because of that rushing upside. And now he has Malik Neighbors. The offensive line is probably still terrible, but Malik Neighbors is going to help him out quite a bit. And yeah, so I would wait until the season starts because I suspect you talk about late first round picks. I think there's a real chance that one of these contending teams in first place might give you their first round pick for Daniel Jones. I think that offer's out there. I've seen it happen before. So what do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the way to play it because, I mean, when teams' quarterbacks go down, they do start getting desperate, especially if they're in the hunt. I had a team that ended up, it won in 2022. It ended up winning last year, but I was going through quarterbacks like Kleenex. I mean, it was just, Kirk Cousins, Daniel Jones, you name it. If they got hurt, they were on my team. So I basically burned through pretty much most of my 2024 picks, trying to buy quarterbacks. I ended up with Gardner Minshew and Sam Howell and Joe Flacco, riding those guys to the end. But it, got me where I wanted to go. But the thing is, I was paying a little bit of a premium for these guys because, you know what? If you're a contender, you don't want to just stop contending because your quarterback goes down. You're gonna spend what it takes to get another quarterback and try to keep going. So that's definitely where you want to be selling quarterbacks like Daniel Jones.
All right, so we're all kind of actually in agreement that if you have him, you definitely want to hold, and if you can get a late second, especially or like even a 2025 second, 2/3 if the owner is desperate enough to get out from under him, you can get that on a starting quarterback. Off season is going to be the cheapest time to get starting quarterbacks. So if you are a QB needy team, it's easier to get Daniel Jones than Justin Fields right now, which we don't know what is going to happen with him. So, you might as well buy. I mean, we're getting a guy who was the QB 10 in fantasy points per game in 2022. I understand that it's easy to think that season is more of an outlier because you don't like Daniel Jones, but he's also had 3 finishes inside the top 17 in fantasy points per game. Yes, he had an abysmal 2023 season, but this is also the first time he's ever had an alpha receiver in his repertoire. I got into an argument in a fantasy league because the group chat was saying that Malik Neighbors didn't have a quarterback that was going to be able to sustain a wide receiver one season, but Chris Olave did. And that just made me mad. Like I understand not liking Daniel Jones, but Derek Carr, I mean, come on. Like if Derek Carr is capable of giving Olave a near top 12 season, like the same is that for Neighbors, and we need to recognize how important having that kind of guy is in fantasy football. Like Joe Burrow, granted he was a rookie, struggled without a Jamar Chase. Like we've even seen that offense sputtered when Jamar Chase was sidelined and it was only T. Higgins. Like having a true alpha receiver like Malik Neighbors is going to change this offense. He was throwing to Darius Slayton as his wide receiver one, Isaiah Hodgins, Wan'Dale Robinson. I mean, this is nuts. He's got Malik Neighbors. He's the cheapest starting quarterback you can get. So absolutely go buy him right now because the price is only going up. He's a starting quarterback.
Yep.
I think this leads into a conversation about another quarterback. There's a polarizing one. What Dan, what do you think about Deshaun Watson? Because Deshaun Watson is another one of these quarterbacks that used to be elite. We think maybe he can still be elite, but I'm looking at Keep Trade Cut, the pulse of the community right now, the fantasy football community, and he's at quarterback 26. Quarterback 26. What are we doing with Deshaun Watson there?
Yeah, to me, that's a crazy price. You have to be thinking about buying Watson at that price. Mm-hmm. I just did a startup this year as a high stakes startup with a bunch of guys that are just they're total sick degenerates. Yeah. You know, it's the kind of league where you can get by with nothing at all. You know, there is no value dropping. It just doesn't happen. And I was able to put Deshaun Watson on my team relatively late in the startup draft relative to the other quarterbacks. And to me, it was kind of the no-brainer decision because, you know, everybody else that was left was pretty much completely devoid of upside. You know, so there's just, you know, you're looking at like, you know, the Matthew Staffords and the Aaron Rodgers and, you know, and worse, Derek Carrs and you know, Daniel Jones and so forth like that, you know, and to be able to get Deshaun Watson in there, a guy who legitimately does still have some upside, you know, because he was legit injured last year, you know, and it's hard to fault him for the season that he had. It's very unfortunate after everything else that he came off of, you know, but I don't think the guy has completely forgotten how to play quarterback. I don't think that he's completely forgotten how to use his legs, which he used to do pretty well. You know, he's a couple years older, but, you know, there is legit upside. You know, like if you ask me which of the, you know, the like quarterbacks rated from 20 on could jump up back into the top 10, I would say Deshaun Watson would probably be my number one candidate for that. You know, so I was making offers for him in the rookie drafts in one league where I was offering like the 203, 204. The guy didn't really want to pull the trigger, but it was more that he was quarterback poor, not that he thought it was a terrible value. You know, so I think you could probably get him for an early second or an early and a mid second or something like that. If you can pick up a quarterback that good for that price, that's crazy.
Yeah, I'm right there with you because when we look at Deshaun Watson, and I get it's a long time ago in a galaxy far away, the 2020 season, the 2019 season. But this is a guy who, I mean, even in his rookie season, he only played 7 games in 2017, but he averaged 24.7 fantasy points per game, and then never had a season until, you know, he had his little incident, right? And that's a euphemism if I've ever used one in my life. But this is like 20 plus fantasy points per game at the quarterback position. Lock it in, a first round pick in a super flex startup. And now he's had back-to-back seasons where he's dealt with injuries. Like he's only played in 6 games. Well, one of the seasons was because of the suspension. And then the next season he was injured, or he was dealing with injuries. And so now he's in it. This is crazy to think about. And there was a quarterback, as you were speaking, that entered my mind that is not like it's a redemption story, but it's not even the same arc story arc. Like, it kind of reminds me of Jared Goff. Like, Jared Goff was good with the Rams and was valued really highly, not as high as Deshaun Watson, but then goes to a new situation. Everybody assumes, oh, like, the Lions, this is going to be terrible. Jared Goff's terrible. And now Jared Goff's good again. And I think Deshaun Watson can be good again. I don't know if he's going to be, elite to the point where he was elite, but he's only 28 years old. I mean, he's got to, for a professional athlete, like 28 years old, especially for a quarterback, is nothing. So I'm right there with you. I think he's got to be on your buy list.
Yeah, I tend to agree. He's 29 years old and somebody that was once one of the top quarterback assets in Dynasty that you could own. But I tend to gravitate towards what the Fantasy Plumber is saying. Like, part of me does truly believe that something is broken there that can't be fixed. And this is projecting. It's, probably overanalyzing. And we'll never know what truly goes on in Deshaun Watson's head. But one point, Josh Larkey brought up, it was either like a picture or a video or just kind of maybe just speaking to, I don't remember it very well, but he said that Deshaun Watson kind of looks like he's carrying something with him, right? Perhaps it's guilt. Wow. I'm not going to get too much into that because, like I said, it is pure speculation. Yeah. But he just has not felt like even the same being since all of this has happened, let alone the same quarterback. Like, even on the field, he just doesn't look like he's had that spark. There's a lot of, a lot of mental things that he has to go through, whether it's, getting hate from people in the public or, hateful messages, on social media. Like, not a lot of people are talking about him very well. So again, a lot of speculation, but just as a person, it's hard for me to look at him and be like, you look like you're going to turn it around, like that's kind of what I'm getting to is like, I haven't seen anything from Deshaun Watson that makes me believe that he's going to turn this around. But as you two have mentioned, if he does unlock that, you're talking about a massive, massive value gain. And even if he doesn't, he put up 15 fantasy points per game in each of the 6 games he's played across the past 2 seasons. That's not bad. So, like, you're buying him at QB 26. Even if he goes out there and has 15 fantasy points per game next year, he's out kicking QB 26. So I understand buying him. I have other quarterback targets where I'm QB needy, but everything's very situational. So I understand wanting to, target him. And there's probably some leagues where it may shake out that way where I target Deshaun Watson. But value-wise, I'm okay with it. He's just not on the top of my list of people who I'm going for. I would buy him before Daniel Jones. I'll say that just to clear the air before people start talking crazy. Like, I would rather take the bet on Deshaun Watson at cost than a guy like Daniel Jones. But
right, and here's a couple thoughts for you. Number one is a much I don't want to say how much older human being than you guys. I what you said, Matt, resonated about. He looks like he's carrying something, but that's something that people can get past in time.
Absolutely.
As well. And that doesn't need to be a permanent state of affairs. For some people, it is, but people are able to grow beyond that, and I think he might be able to do that. And the other thing is, here's what I did. Deshaun Watson, you go get him, and then you go get yourself some really cheap Jameis Winston, and you're covered.
Oh, yeah.
Because you know what? Best case scenario, Deshaun Watson does great. And that asset massively increases in value, or at least increases in value, and you win there. Worst case scenario, Deshaun Watson does just good enough to hold on to the job, but isn't a very good quarterback. Then you're kind of stuck. The middle scenario is Deshaun Watson sucks, and they throw Jameis Winston in there, and now you've got yourself a fantasy carnival. So it's an easy way to win when you can pick up a backup like Jameis Winston, throw him in with Deshaun Watson, and then you're really covered.
I like that. I like that. That kind of goes back to the Denver cheating. Like you can cheat in Dynasty. Like you can have both of your bases covered. And wow, very literary from Josh Larkey. I don't know if he's writes poetry in his spare time about Deshaun Watson carrying the guilt of his crimes around with him on the football field. But
I'm pretty sure
really
he
good.
talked about this back in in 2022, when he was first coming back from it. But
Gotcha.
He because I had him in some seasonal leagues, and he's a very vibrant, positive, energetic guy, and we haven't seen that from him when he came back. Regardless of what's fueling that. It's a very real thing where his on-field demeanor just hasn't seemed like he's there. Before the injury concerns came out, people were saying that he was just pulling himself out of the game. So I mean, this is how he looks on the field. He's approaching Jay Cutler levels of apathy. Where
oh no,
he's
a
couple games away from getting a smoking Deshaun Watson meme.
Oh man, I don't know. That's a whole new level of apathy there. Jay Cutler, man.
I loved Jay Cutler, and I feel like he was an underrated competitor and quarterback. But for the sake of the joke,
oh man, that's the NFC Championship game. I can't get out of my head when he's standing on the sidelines. But do we want to go rapid fire with one more? Dan, what's one more Dynasty buy real quick that you could give people? Because I feel like we've been on the or Dynasty sell anything. Do whatever you want.
I'll give you a buy, and furthermore, I'm going to give you a bear. Even better.
Oh, I like this.
Yeah, give me DeAndre Swift.
All right.
Yeah.
I like it.
Well, love DeAndre Swift. I've been buying him here and there. Definitely taking a lot of shares in redraft and best ball. I think he's in a perfect situation, where they've got a new quarterback. They're going to let him carry a lot of the load. I think, they didn't pay him what they're paying him to be a committee back. Khalil Herbert, I think he's a good back, but I just don't think Chicago likes him very well. Roshan Johnson, they didn't let him do very much. When the other backs were hurt, it seemed like they were always using Roshan plus somebody. They never really wanted him to carry the load. And then they go out, after spending a third-round pick on Roshan, and they grab DeAndre Swift. That tells me that the Bears are all in on Swift, and they're going to give him every chance to succeed. Now, you can say, I don't think he's a good player. I know a lot of people think that. I disagree. I think he's a pretty good player who's had some injury issues in the past, and he got set up in a situation on Philadelphia last year where they just didn't use him that much because of Jalen Hurts 15 tush pushes and all that kind of stuff. He didn't come through for us in fantasy in a very big way. But I'm in on the redemption story here in Chicago.
I love that because sorry I cut you off there,
no,
Matt,
you're totally fine.
But he was a career low in receptions last year, and I don't think that's going to happen with Caleb Williams, and number 22 in targets amongst running backs, and I don't think that's going to happen with Caleb Williams. So I love that. I love that from you, Dan. That's a good call.
Yeah, I have a couple worries about DeAndre Swift. Now, I'll admit, in preparation for this show, I went in and looked at some of his numbers, and I went, oh, whoa. DeAndre Swift has been a top 15 RB in fantasy points per game 3 out of his 4 seasons, and all of them outside of Philadelphia. And that's kind of what stuck out to me because these narratives start to build up on a player as years go along, and sometimes you zoom out and you're like, whoa. DeAndre Swift hasn't even been that bad. He just struggled to beat out Jamal Williams' goal line role. And then he gets traded to Philadelphia, who spent way more capital than they should have for how much they planned to use him. It didn't really make any sense what they did there in that situation. But then, 10% target share in Philly was his lowest of his career, and that's what's big. But Caleb Williams is not necessarily known for throwing to his running back. Is this something that's going to translate from college to the NFL? Quite frankly, I have no idea. I don't know if Caleb Williams wasn't targeting Marshawn Lloyd because he didn't have to or because he's just a guy who prefers to throw the ball downfield. But we can be sure that Shane Waldron is going to try and get the most out of Swift's talent. So he's going to get targeted. My guess is he's going to be a 10% target share guy. I think I'm okay with Swift at face value. Similarly to Watson, it's like he's not the first running back that I'm kind of going after. Like, I would rather target Joe Mixon than DeAndre Swift. But if I see somebody trading for Swift at cost, I'm not saying like, oh, terrible move, like Swift is going to bust this year. I just think there is some uncertainty as to how Caleb Williams is going to be in terms of, because if he's not checking down, then Swift is going to have to be schemed into the passing game a lot. We just don't know what that's going to look like. But Swift has a lot of positive factors to him. The one thing that I don't mean to poo-poo on the whole contract point, but I think we're starting to see these running back contracts look like they're worth more than they are. So I do think that the Bears brought him in for a reason and are going to use him. He's their starting running back. So this is different than Miles Sanders in that way. But in the same vein, I don't look at either of them as locked-in starters because of what they got from their teams. Technically, I don't think this will happen, but the Bears can save $1 million if they cut Swift at the end of this season. So that's kind of the interesting thing about his contract, is that it is 24 over 3, but they could get out scot-free next year. But that's actually a good thing for Swift, because that promotes more usage in year one to see what they have in this guy. So I'm okay with it.
All right. Is there a buy or sell that you want to bring up, Matt, as we kind of round things out?
Are you paying the premium to get CJ Stroud at cost right now? Is he one of those guys like Mahomes? Keep in mind, we once thought Herbert was one of those guys where you pay the farm to get the elite quarterback. So let's kind of talk about that as we round out the show. Like, are you willing to pay the premium to get a CJ Stroud on your team?
I'm gonna say no. Just because of, kind of what you were talking about, Matt. You don't want to buy guys when they're super high. And everybody is so in on Stroud. The Houston offense, it's one of the most expensive stacks you can get in best ball. It's just crazy expensive. He is going in the first round of startups. Here's the thing about Stroud. His ceiling is not the same ceiling as a quarterback that really uses his legs. His ceiling is more like Dak Prescott than it is like Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen. And we've seen the prices you can get Dak Prescott for. So I would rather I'd rather just go get a Dak Prescott for a lot cheaper and let somebody else have the designer option in CJ Stroud. And you can say, well, Prescott's older. Yeah, you're right. But, if you're talking about a 3, 4, 5 year window, Dak Prescott's still fine. And I don't project any dynasty players out any farther than that. Quarterbacks are the only ones I get even remotely close to like 4 years with. And, I'm totally comfortable with Dak over the next 4 years. So I'll just take that cheaper option.
Yeah, Stroud's tricky because the value is so high, like you said, and he finishes the quarterback 11 last year. He's the quarterback 7 in fantasy points per game, and you're going, why? I get it, he's young. Okay, I know. Like in Dynasty, we care about these things, except for quarterback. Like quarterback, it shouldn't matter as much. So a move that I'm currently trying to do is I'm trying to tier down in the leagues that I have CJ Stroud. I'm trying to tier down to like Kyler Murray and Anthony Richardson. Maybe I'd go so far down as to go with a Brock Purdy and to see what I can get on top of that, because I feel like I'm going to get a similar production from Brock Purdy as long as he's, in that situation, which I think San Francisco is going to support him. I mean, Brock Purdy is also young, doesn't have the draft capital, but he was the quarterback 6 last year, and he was the quarterback 6 in fantasy points per game. So if that's a move that's out there for me to make, I'll be making it. And actually, I did make that move last year. Now that I think about it, and we talked about it on this channel, and I think it worked out pretty well for me because I think it turned into I traded CJ Stroud for Brock Purdy and 2 2024 first-round picks. And I think one of those picks was Jaden Daniels, and the other pick was Ladd McConkey. So I feel pretty good about that. I feel like I came out ahead on that. So, again, Stroud, I'm right there with you. I think he's at the top of his value because he's not one of these quarterbacks that's going to run around like a Lamar Jackson or an Anthony Richardson or a Kyler Murray. So those – like if I could tear down to that, like if I could get Kyler Murray plus or some Anthony Richardson plus, yeah, I'll take that all day long. Mr. Babich, do you have an opinion on this subject?
Yeah, I forgot I was the one that posed the question, actually. I was over there interacting with the chat, and the conversation got a little lost for me. But yeah, I agree. I think what I'll say is if you truly believe, like you're in a super flex league, you're sitting with let's say a Baker Mayfield at best, kind of QB2, maybe even worse. If you pay the farm for Stroud, you better win in the next couple of seasons because you're going to be so strapped for capital that you better hope that within the next few seasons, like the odds of a major value dip, and I mean by him going from QB2 like a Herbert like back down to QB10, the odds of that happening at some point in the next 5 years, we just know the market is very volatile. It's pretty likely. Guys like Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, like these are the exceptions. Jalen and Josh because they run a lot, and Patrick because he's Patrick effing Mahomes. These are anomalies. And Stroud, because he doesn't rush, is a victim to passing efficiency and other quarterbacks. So there's Lamar Jackson who's going to be in there for a while. There's Joe Burrow. Like Justin Herbert could very easily get some talent in the next 2 to 3 seasons and come back up. So, at the end of the day, if you win a championship trading for CJ Stroud, congrats. Like LA Rams style, right? Like sell your soul for it. You can do it. But it's a move that's more than likely going to have you sitting there in 2 to 3 years saying like, man, I can't believe I overpaid for CJ Stroud. If you did it with Herbert a couple of years ago, you're saying like I paid 2 firsts plus to get the QB9 in an offense that's throwing to Ladd McConkey as their wide receiver 1. It can happen to anybody if it can happen to Herbert.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to end it. The chat, I just want to shout out the chat. The chat's been alive all night. Fantasy Plumber's in there. Slashy's in there. Gerard Dean is in there. So thank you guys. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Don't forget to click the like button on this video. But Dan, thank you so much for joining us. What do you have to plug? And if you have a bold take I'm going to try to end the show appropriately this time. Maybe. I still have to get in my Aaron Rodgers stuff, but what do you have to plug, and do you have a bold take for us tonight? If you don't, that's fine too, because I'm kind of putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I didn't come equipped with a bold take.
Right.
I'll have to think about that as we're signing off here. But yeah, thanks guys for having me on. This is always a blast. We're already at a buck 14 here on time, and it's felt like literally 30 minutes. So
yeah.
A ton of fun. Love the chat in this in here too. A lot of great comments and questions and suggestions and everything. So a great group of guys there as well. And you can catch me regularly with Bradley Stalder. We're doing Thursday night best ball. So you can catch us there. And then I have an article coming out, 5 fades in best ball, because I do a lot of best ball as well as Dynasty. So make sure that you are checking that out on the site, and you'll see a bunch of my work as we go through and have the player profiler draft guide set up. I'll be doing a lot of work on that as well. So I'll just be kind of all over the site, pitching in wherever, and talking football anytime I can. So thanks a lot for having me on, guys.
Of course, of course. Matt Babich, what do you get to plug these days?
It's Wednesday night, so it's my weekly plug of the Player Profiler news team. Go follow the Profiler NFL, or sorry, Player Profiler News YouTube channel, the Profiler underscore NFL Twitter account, to stay in touch with all of our news team and their latest productions. I mean, they're breaking down everything that's going on every single day, live tweets, articles on playerprofiler.com/news, YouTube shorts, and we got Player Profiler today, 7 days a week, the news program at 6 p.m. Central. We have an array of hosts going every single day of the week, 7 days a week, and you can catch me there on Saturday nights at 6, again on the Player Profiler News YouTube channel and the Profiler underscore NFL Twitter account. So be sure to check that out. If you're still in rookie draft season and haven't gotten the rookie guide, go to check that out on playerprofiler.com. If you're Dynasty Deluxe, I believe that's something you already have free in your account. I might be wrong there, but I'm pretty sure. And then in season's coming up, we have May. We just had the schedule release, so stay in tune. We have Dan's Underdog content coming out, so we're gonna have Scott Fishbowl coming out for anyone who's in that Underdog content, seasonal content, as well as continuing our Dynasty content. So it's just the time of the year where Player Profiler really just starts ramping up to get ready for the season starts. So it's a really exciting time. So if you're new, subscribe, find all of our channels. You can catch me on Twitter at Babich_Matt10. For the audio listeners, BABICH_MATT10. And my bold prediction is that Joe Mixon, who will have a 75% plus opportunity share for the Houston Texans offense, currently drafted at RB15 on Underdog and Best Ball Drafts, will finish as a top 7 running back in fantasy points per game. This Houston Texans offense that struggled to convert red zone opportunities, 2 touchdowns in 2023, gets a workhorse running back. They flip that script. They resurge. They become one of the most successful teams at putting the ball in the end zone. And Joe Mixon is going to be winning a lot of people a lot of money, including this guy.
I don't know. Is that bold? Is that a bold prediction? I don't know if that counts.
There's a lot of people who are out on Mixon, so yeah, I would.
Yeah.
Go tell Devon A-Chain drafters that Joe Mixon is going to outscore him in fantasy points per game, and you get back to me and tell me if you think it's a hot take.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah,
There,
I'm right there with you.
now we're getting spicy. I like
There
that.
we go.
I
Yeah,
like
fine.
that.
You want me to say it? Joe Mixon outscores Devon A-Chain in fantasy points per game.
Clip it, Jay. Clip it. There we go. We
I
got
don't
it.
even- I don't even.
We got a viral take there for sure.
That is hot. Why not? I love the.
I'll
Dan,
throw you my
go ahead.
hot take as well. I'm going to say Jaden Daniels finishes as a top 5 quarterback in fantasy this year.
Ooh.
I like it.
I
I like
love it.
those rushing quarterbacks. Like the only thing, like, just please get him a slip and slide. Just get down, but go out of bounds. Like, we don't need you taking these big hits, because that was like my one concern in college was like, oh my god, dude, like, this is the SEC. You got to get down, man. But I love that. I love that. I wasn't the biggest fan of his as far as like a prospect, but there's definitely like tools there that can be developed, and he's in a good situation too for fantasy football. So I think that's very possible. And where he's going in drafts right now, super late, especially in some of these best ball leagues. So love that. I don't know if I have a bold prediction tonight. I mean, anything I say about Caleb Williams, people are just going to poo-poo, but I think Caleb Williams is going to break that Chicago Bears record. He's going to have 4,000 passing yards. I mean, come on, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Roma Dunze, Cole Kmet. This is a good year for rookie quarterbacks. If you're into the rookie quarterbacks, like you could even sell me on like Bo Nix super late in some of these best ball leagues. So Caleb Williams, bear down. Thank you so much, guys. Again, like and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter, I guess, at Seth_DIEWOLD. And until next time, Nobody cares about Aaron Rodgers. Wiseman for Heisman. We'll see you next time.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.